From unexpected blowouts to unexpected blow-ups, Pokemon has triggered countless fiery fiascos that have had the fans fuming and the Squirtle squealing. And today's plan is to venture into the tall grass to uproot 10 of the juiciest controversies that have ever rocked the world of Pokemon. So put on your best salt-proof vest and let's jump right in. Ashy Boy has sucked back some pretty greasy L's over the years, but no loss sparked fire and fury quite like his loss to Elan in the Kalos League finals. And yet, stacked up to the Game Shark guy, Puss in Boots, and rip-off Richie debacles, why was it specifically the loss to Elan that triggered a pants-pooping pandemic all the way from Barbados to Bangladesh? In short, it was all about mismatched expectations. Because more than any other series, Ash was in it to win it in the XY series, concentrating everything he had into winning the league and reminding us of his conviction at every opportunity. And after literally decades of losing league conferences, fans were sure that it was finally his time to shine. Then Elan hit the scene. A bad man with a Mega Charizard X and a funny scarf who turned up out of nowhere to clobber Ash in 2 exhibition matches, setting up what would surely be Ash's 3rd times the charm triumph, right? However, although their 3rd and final battle in the league finals went down to the wire, Ash Greninja just couldn't make the cut, ultimately succumbing to a stadium-shaking blast burn from Mega Charizard X that sent Ashy Boy packing back to Pallet Town, with nothing but his tears and a face smeared in Serena's saliva speckles. Needless to say, the Pokemon fandom Salt Factory was cranking salt all summer long. And to this day, Elan is the only main rival who Ash has never beaten. If it's any consolation, in the World Coronation Series Masters 8 tournament, Elan got steamtrolled by Leon, who Ash went on to defeat to become the world's #1 trainer, so it was almost like a victory by proxy. The Pokemon anime has sure had its fair share of controversial characters, but holy hoppips did Go ever get the bulbous neck veins popping. From effortlessly catching every Pokemon in sight, to stealing the spotlight from Ash in his send-off series, to making our man look the fool against Flagon, to jacking Team Rocket's Grookey, to capturing not 1 but 2 legendary Pokemon. What a guy. But more than anything, I'll always remember the hot buttery meltdowns in response to episode 53, Healing the Healer, wherein Go did the unthinkable. He caught the legendary dog Suicune. Outside of select examples, the anime had always presented legendary Pokemon as mystical, untamable forces of the natural world, but Go undid that mystique in one fateful throw that left Minaki in a broken heap, infuriated fans who were fed up with Go's catch-a-thon, and, speaking of Go, oh, Pokemon Go, the app that got us off the couch and out into the real world, and got Niantic into one steamy controversy after the next. From Pokestops cropping up at rather sensitive locations, to trainers walking into traffic or off cliffs while hunting Hypnos, to the player base generally being a nuisance to property owners, to etc etc. A game unfolding in the real world was bound to sow a certain amount of chaos, but one specific debacle that rocked fans was Pokemon Go Fest 2017. Go Fest was the game's first official in-person event, and the hype for it was off the charts. Just 15 minutes after tickets went on sale, trainers and scalpers had snapped up every single ticket, and players from around the USA and around the world would soon gather at Chicago's Grant Park on July 22nd, 2017 for the event of a lifetime. And it certainly was the event of a lifetime, but not for the reasons that anyone expected. Because shortly after the event kicked off, a Pandora's box of technical issues sprung open, crashing the park's mobile network faster than a Geodude using self-destruct. And with that, approximately 20,000 paying attendees were left catching buffer screens instead of Nidoqueens. Many players couldn't even log into their accounts. CEO John Hank was booed on stage. Outrage erupted across the interwebs. And even after refunding tickets and giving every attendee a Lugia plus $100 of in-game currency, Niantic was the target of a class action lawsuit over the incident. The silver lining is that in spite of this catastrophe, the subsequent year's event was a smashing success. Long hair, luscious lips, purple skin, not so purple skin. Jinx is an iconic Pokemon, but her original design quickly came under fire for perceived insensitivity when Carol Weatherford claimed that Jinx resembled offensive caricatures that Western society had begun to acknowledge as deeply disrespectful from as early as the mid to late 20th century. And whether Jinx's design actually had anything to do with these caricatures, or had actually drawn inspiration from some mixture of mythological figures such as Hel or Brunhild, or the Yuki Onna and Yamamba of Japanese folklore, the Fat Lady of opera fame, or something else altogether, Nintendo was more than happy to dodge that hot potato and simply tweaked the design. So similar to how Mr. Popo became Mr. Blue Blue in the 4Kids adaptation of Dragon Ball Kai, Jinx's skin changed from black to purple. But unfortunately, the controversy had already caused the anime's charming 250th episode to be altogether cut from international broadcasts, and various other episodes featuring Jinx were either altered or permanently pulled from circulation. Even so, the purple interpol was too late to save the Japanese version of Brock from mind-searing mouth-to-mouth action, and if you've never seen The Ice Cave, maybe that's for the best. Uri Geller is a performer famous for his psychic tricks, such as his iconic spoon-bending routine, and his popularity in the late 20th century inspired Pokemon's developers to pay tribute to him in the form of the psychic Pokemon Kadabra. But our spoony bard's crystal ball must have shown him that Kadabra would lead the world to a darker future, because in 2002 he teleported Nintendo straight into the courtroom with a super effective £60 million lawsuit that effectively prevented Kadabra from appearing in the anime or TCG for 20 years. Thus, the Abracadabra Alakazam evolution line was broken, and future Alakazam cards in the TCG were only playable thanks to mechanics that skipped evolution altogether, such as the LVX, EX, and V gimmicks, Rare Candy, or Abra's ability in Mysterious Treasures that allows it to evolve directly into Alakazam. The good news is that due to unrelenting pressure from fans as well as encouragement from his granddaughters, Uri Geller finally had a change of heart in 2020, altogether giving up on the bendy battle of the last 2 decades and expressing his regret over it. After which Kadabra appeared in 2021's Pokemon Evolution episodes The Show and finally returned to the TCG in 2023's Pokemon Card 151 expansion set. At last, the Kadabra curse had been broken. It took just a single word to turn the 2019 Pokemon World Championship Finals into a nightmare for one finalist and leave the official Pokemon YouTube channel stream sitting at nearly 50% dislikes. So what happened? Judge kill is a phrase to describe when a player loses a match due to a judge's unjust ruling, and many fans argue that that is exactly what happened in 2019's TCG Masters Division Finals featuring Shintaro Ito and Henry Brand. Because Pokemon TCG tournaments are played as a best of 3, and the first game of the finals was in an exhilarating spot, only for things to suddenly take a horrifying turn for the worst. Basically, Henry's Reshiram and Charizard GX took down Shintaro's Heatran GX with double blaze, meaning that Henry only had to take 2 more prize cards to win on his next turn, whereas Shintaro still had to take 3, which was not going to be an easy task. However, it was still possible that Shintaro could have won if he had hit the right cards on his upcoming turn, so he took his time contemplating which Pokemon to promote into the active spot to maximize his odds. But apparently too much time, because a judge soon interrupted play to give Shintaro a game-ending double prize penalty for slow play that crushed his soul, put him at a huge disadvantage, and understandably left him rattled going into the second round. Long story short, he lost the second game, the championship match, and could only slump into a heap of despair over the series of unfortunate events that had just transpired. Henry Brand is a top-tier player who probably would have won without the penalty, but no one wants to see judge-issued losses in the World Championship Finals of all places, and Shintaro's supporters were absolutely furious over the decision. That said, a close assessment of the rules and Shintaro's tournament record indicate that the call was correct, but it was a sad one to see, and it sparked a double blaze of outrage at the event and online nevertheless. There are a handful of banned Pokemon episodes that either never made it out of Japan or ended up butchered by extensive edits, and Beauty and the Beach is one of the most memorable. The episode was controversial enough to be cut from the show's stateside run in 1998, and it only ever aired in a highly edited 18-minute version, 3 years after its Japanese release before disappearing altogether from the English Pokemon sphere. But why? Basically, the episode is centered on a beach beauty and Pokemon costume contest that got a little bit too wild for American broadcasting standards. Put simply, James, who was known for his flamboyant cross-dressing in the early era of the anime, shows up to the contest in a, well-featured inflatable suit, asserts that his beauty transcends gender, and then mocks Misty by saying, "You're 10 years too early for a pair like this." It was a joke, and it was hardly the chestiest moment in the original series, but it was enough to see the episode banished by Western countries. Of course, if Japan's Jiggly James didn't cause enough trouble, the icing on the ban cake was Old Man Mo, a pervy Master Roshi-style character who sets aside some pretty questionable age dynamics to spam Leer on Misty and tell her that things would be a lot more fun if only she was 8 years older. When the edited down English version of the episode finally did surface on June 24th, 2000, WB Kids marketed the episode as the Lost episode. But with the actual contents that made it a Lost episode left on the cutting room floor, viewers must have wondered what all the fuss was about. What could be worse than Suicunes, judge kills, and inflatable suits? Well, Nazis, I guess. Koga's Ninja Trick was a fairly inconsequential card from Pokemon TCG's Gym Challenge expansion set. Or it would have been inconsequential if not for the symbol printed just behind Koga's Golbat. As you can see, the symbol is a swastika that in many parts of the world would quickly bring to mind the symbol appropriated by Germany's Nazi Party, and this misconception kicked up a fuss that forced a makeover prior to the card's international release. And it's just very unfortunate that the Nazis' twist on the swastika would scar international perceptions of the symbol so deeply, as the original swastika itself has long been a symbol of serendipity, peace, and other good things, not to mention that it emerged at least 2,000 years prior to the Nazi Party's rise to power. For example, in Japan's Buddhist tradition, the swastika is referred to as a manji, and it has two distinct variants. The omote manji is linked to infinite mercy, whereas the ura manji signifies strength and intelligence. And the omote manji is commonly seen in daily life in Japan, not to mention that it's easily visible on Google Maps to denote the location of Buddhist temples across the country. But despite the swastika's positive connotations in various cultures, the Nazi association remains strong in various other parts of the world, so don't expect a faithful international reprint of Koga's Ninja Trick anytime soon. Of course, the Ninja Trick fiasco isn't the only time that perceived Nazi imagery in Pokemon startled the West, but next up we have a controversy that is far more shocking. Japan, 1997. Pikachu had already become a household name and the unstoppable Pokemon multimedia frenzy was in full swing, but a controversy more shocking than a 10,000-volt thunderbolt was about to zap the nation. On December 16th, 1997, Electric Soldier Porygon aired in Japan. It was a fun, Tron-like episode in which the gang entered the cyberspace of a Pokeball transporter to stop Team Rocket from stealing Pokemon passing through the system. However, there was a particular scene wherein Pikachu launches an attack that detonates 2 missiles, resulting in a spectacular explosion animated with the Paka Paka and flash techniques that were popular bang-for-buck tools in Japanese animation at the time. Unfortunately, the speed and intensity of the flashing lights would see hundreds of children across Japan rushed into hospitals suffering from epileptic episodes that ranged from blurred vision to seizures to loss of consciousness, and thousands more children would report symptoms in the days to come. The incident made headlines around the world faster than Quick Attack. Japan was shocked at what this show had done to its children. The anime went off air for months, and the future of the Pokemon franchise itself teetered on the edge of a scyther's claw. Eventually, the anime returned to TV, but the incident was widely criticized, satirized, and forever changed the Japanese animation industry by forcing new regulations into place to prevent future incidents, which was a very good thing. Although later research suggested that outside of the initial hospitalizations, many of the reports of symptoms in the coming days resembled mass hysteria more than epilepsy, the episode remains one of the most shocking cartoon controversies ever, and banished Porygon to the realm of naughty Pokemon. That said, the official tweet that the Pokemon Company posted and swiftly deleted back in 2022 stands correct. Porygon did nothing wrong. Here we are at the end of all things, at the cataclysmic event that pressed humanity to the edge of extinction. None other than the Dexit fiasco in which Pokemon were cut, internet babies cried, and Twitter, Reddit, and other internet message boards erupted in an inferno of hatred. Because, you see, leading up to the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield, Bobby was hyped to catch Pocket Monsters on the Nintendo Switch because after decades of waiting, he would finally get to see all of his favorite Pokemon in a main series Pokemon game on home consoles. But then, Game Freak grabbed Bobby by the neck and cranked him over the knee for a diabolic noogie he would never forget. To be specific, Game Freak announced that in order to relieve their animators from the hellish task of modeling nearly 2,000 cartoon animal butt cheeks in 3D, only several hundred of nearly 900 monsters would be available in or transferable to Pokemon Sword and Shield, and this was going to be the norm moving forward. Rest in peace, National Dex. That said, not pouring millions upon millions of dollars into an increasingly unwieldy luxury feature that only a handful of players actually cared about seemed like a pretty reasonable decision. So surely fans would not be all that upset, right? Wrong. Bobby cried about the noogie, he screamed about how nasty Game Freak was on Reddit, he proclaimed that he would boycott the games, and thousands of his friends did the same, with some going so far as to unleash a campaign of death threats and targeted harassment upon the game's developers. The online hate mob was more prolific than a ditto at a daycare center, and one had to wonder if Game Freak really had made a miscalculation that would sink the Pokemon franchise. Except that when the game's actually came out, Bobby and his friends sucked it up, bought their captors' products as usual, and the wheels of history continued to turn. Even so, the hard feelings would trigger a fallout that would last for the better part of a year, and somewhere between these somewhat laughably unpolished graphics and a world that felt about as lively as a nuclear test site, we could see some reasons why the Stockholm Syndrome crowd were so angry about the games. But in the end, Game Freak got the last laugh, selling a whopping 26 million copies of Pokemon Sword and Shield to make them the best-selling Pokemon games since Red, Green, and Blue.